Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for tuning into the channel. I'm here with Zac Farson. Zac, tell us a little bit about yourself, PT and non-PT related.
Yeah, so my name is Dr. Zac Farson. I can introduce myself as that now.
Yeah.
Um, I just spent the last 3 years in PT school. We were talking about this a little bit off camera, but I was in Wisconsin for my PT school, although a lot of my end rotations were in the South Florida area. And that all came from the decision to be as close as possible to the sports world as I could. So this is something that we'll get into on the podcast, but as soon as I started PT school, I started documenting my journey, and that just led further and further to the point where I leveraged it as much as I could to make as many connections as I could. And now that's getting me further than I ever thought before. And so I think that's basically what we're going to be talking about today is personal branding in the world of PT and how to do it sustainably. And yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah. And there's so much to unpack here, but I think the biggest thing that you mentioned was the personal brand. Before we kind of get more into like the sports PT side of things, how would you define a personal brand? Because a lot of students hear about it, but they don't entirely know what it's really about.
Yeah, so it is a lot to unpack. I think if you want to look at it simply, a personal brand is basically just like your reputation. Like when you think about a brand, like you think Nike, you think sports, athletes, running shoes, whatever you think, but your brain goes somewhere when you think about Nike, and I think a personal brand is just what do people think of when they think of you, and how do they see you? And I think the unique part about a personal brand is that you kind of get to mold that reputation, at least the online portion of it, because you're only putting out what you want to put out. And again, obviously, the more authentic you are, the better, because you want people to like your personal brand for who you actually are instead of just like what you're putting out there. But yeah, I think essentially a personal brand is just who you are, but then on a scale of people actually having an association with who you are.
Yeah, I think that's a great definition. Something that really stood out to me was making it authentic, because especially in like the age of AI where people think like
Yeah,
everything is automated, if you can make it as personal about you as possible, that's something that's really going to help you stand out, especially like you said in the sports world and just building your
yeah,
brand as a PT.
100%.
And you had mentioned you documented your journey right from when you started school. What was kind of going through your mind with that process? Did you anticipate to be where you are now? Anything you weren't expecting throughout that process?
I had no idea where it was going to go. And I think that's something that holds people back from starting a personal brand is the whole what do I post about dilemma.
Mhm.
But like the easiest way to do it is just show up online as yourself. Like we all have thoughts in our head every single day and things that you would tell your friends about. Or this happened to me and I'm going to tell you this story. But you're just telling that story to the internet instead of telling it to one of your friends or to a coworker or something like that. I think that's the easiest way to start is just like genuinely being yourself on a camera. And that's kind of how I started was like talking about school. And I think that it resonated with people because it's such a specific niche of like PT students. Uh, and there's so many PT students creating content right now. I would just say that if you want to go about it, make sure that it's authentically you because you can make all like the PT school memes that you want. And like I'll still make those every once in a while. They're funny memes that are related to our profession because everybody gets it and it's kind of like an us versus them like inside
Yeah,
jokes.
humor. Yeah.
But at the end of the day, like there's so many people making those memes and you can do it for fun, but you're not going to really make any real connections doing that as much as you would if you're putting yourself out there and having unique ideas and talking about your experience. And so the way that I started was pretty much just like day in the life stuff. And I think that's the easiest way to do it because you're already doing those things. So just start recording them, and then whoever aligns with it will align with it. And you make one relationship online at a time, and you just keep going from there.
Yeah. I love that you had mentioned too, just taking people along your journey because there's so many unique things about you. Like if you like matcha, somebody else can relate to that and it's not even PT
Absolutely.
related. So
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's the biggest thing is your niche overall does have to be somewhat defined. Like you have to be within PT or within strength and conditioning. But then on your stories and stuff, people really get to know you. So like for example, I love coffee, and one of the coffees that I like the most was like this Cafe Bustelo
So
mix.
yeah.
I haven't even talked about Cafe Bustelo in 3 months, and yesterday somebody DM'd me a picture of them getting Cafe Bustelo, and they were like, "Thank you so much for putting me on." And it's like just those
Yeah.
little things, and it makes me
True.
smile. It's awesome.
Yeah.
So that's definitely a big part of it.
Yeah. That must be, well, did you get that in South Florida? That's like a big thing because it's a big.
Yes, I have a picture of me next to a sign that says "I love Miami," and then it's like a little
Mhm.
Cafe Bustelo thing.
I love that. I love that.
Amazing down there. The one thing that everywhere in the world needs that I feel like only Miami has is colada, Cuban coffee. But I could talk about that for like another year.
Yeah. That might be another talk.
Yeah.
And you had mentioned that you were interested in sports. Take us through your journey with this. What got you into PT and what led you down the sports route?
Yeah, I always went into PT knowing that I wanted to do sports. And a lot of times professors or mentors will tell you like, well, keep your mind open because you never know what you're going to fall into. I was always like, absolutely not. Like, I know I don't want to work in a hospital. I know I want to do sports. Nothing's talking me out of it. And I kept an open mind when I went into those rotations and those different settings, and I learned a lot from those. But from the beginning, it's been sports because I started off with a sports injury and I had a young PT who was awesome. And I just looked at him and I was like, this is your job? Like, he's standing up, walking around throughout the day, hanging out in a gym, talking to athletes. And I was like, that just doesn't seem like it's a job. That just seems like something I'd want to do for free.
Yeah.
And so he basically introduced me to the world of PT. And then I started looking into the schooling. And although everybody was screaming like the debt to income ratio isn't worth it and don't do it and all this stuff, there were a couple PTs online who was like, you know what, this is what I want to do, whether or not the money's there. I just like it as a career, and I think that you can make anything work. And so, since I truly wanted to do it, I just pursued it. And that was kind of how I started off and knew that I wanted to be in the sports world. Diving deeper into the sports world is what happened through my personal brand and kind of making some of those connections.
Awesome. And that kind of leads into the next question. What like connections have you made? Were they in person, online? How did that all kind of
Yeah.
come to be?
Yeah. I have made connections with so many people at this point, both students and professionals within the space. And it's truly just been through an authentic, like, willingness to learn. And I think that comes off. And so when you're DMing these people who are at the top of the field, a lot of like NBA strength coaches or NFL PTs, just people that are like as high up in the space as you can get, if they see that you have an account and they see that you're a PT student and that you're actually coming to them to learn, then like they're probably not going to leave you unread. They're at least going to give you a response or a keep going or something. And you can just leverage that into learning more from them and then giving them some sort of value too. And we could talk for like days on how to do that. But I think at the end of the day, being as authentic as possible with like wanting to learn from these people is the best way to do it. And that for me started online. So I would just get on a phone call with as many people as I possibly could. And like it seems like a crazy shot to shoot to ask somebody who's working in professional sports if they have 10 minutes to like teach you something.
Yeah.
But it's those 10 minutes that's so important because if you show up and you like your questions are horrible or you don't really seem interested, then like they're never going to talk to you again and they're going to be like, dang, I just wasted my time. But if you show up and you are dialed in and like they can tell you're serious and you're just a good conversationalist, then they're going to be a little bit impressed by you and maybe keep you around and maybe respond to you the next time that you DM them too.
Yeah.
And so if you have enough of those conversations and then you have enough people following you to where the next time that somebody sees you, they see, oh, my friend who works in professional sports is also following this guy. And then they take you a little bit more seriously. And then you get to the point where you're not pretending about anything. You're just truly engulfed in the sports world and you
Yeah.
have these friends that are also in the sports world, and you can just kind of send ideas back and forth throughout the day. And it's really a place that I never thought I'd be, but it happens so naturally and gradually that it's worth it to just send that first DM to somebody. And you'd be surprised at how willing people are to help in our profession because it is a small profession, especially when you go even more into a niche like sports, PT alone. PT is small, PT world is small, sports PT is even smaller,
Right.
professional sports is even smaller. So everybody's willing to help each other out.
Yeah. There's so much to unpack there, but I think the biggest thing,
Yeah.
especially since a lot of students are watching this, is you have the advantage as a student that you're trying to learn. It's a little bit different when like a PT texts or messages another PT or someone in the
Yes.
sports world. But can you like, did you feel like you had that advantage as a student?
1,000,000%. 1,000,000%. They are going to look at you differently, and they're also going to be more willing to help you out, if that makes sense. Because at the end of the day, like everybody has somewhat of an ego. Like if
Yeah.
I made it into professional sports and then a kid is like, "Oh my gosh, you're the best. I love what you do in professional sports. Could you help me out?" Like you're more willing to help them out than somebody who's a 40-year-old physical therapist who could be in sports if they wanted to at this point. And you can kind of tell they're just trying to like piggyback off of you or something like that. But the whole student advantage really comes in with them seeing themselves in you. And I can't tell you how many people I've had that have said like, "Oh, you just remind me of younger me" or whatever. And I think it's that aspect that
Yeah.
kind of draws people towards you as a student. And so using that student framing, not as like there's nothing ungenuine about it. It's just like a real advantage that you have being a student over being a licensed physical therapist, which is why I think it is so important to start as a student so you can begin getting yourself into whatever world you want to before you graduate.
Yeah. I'm so glad you mentioned that too, because that it can be a lot of pressure as a student, like to you feel like you're just
Yeah.
DMing like these higher up people, but they were where you were at one point. So that's
Yeah,
awesome.
and I want to make it clear too that like if you don't have a profile picture and you're a private account and you DM one of these, people that you follow on social media and you really want to connect with them, like good luck.
Yes.
But if you are actively like building a personal brand or talking about your days in PT school or you have that you're a PT student in your bio or anything like that, now your chances go up. And just the more reps that you put in, the better.
Right. I love that. And I feel like that kind of not answer, but leads into the next question with elephant in the room is PT school is super busy. There's so much on their plate. What would you say to someone that's maybe on the fence about starting a personal brand and is just struggling with time management and actually pulling it off?
Yeah, I think I hate to be that guy, but like the time excuse is just never valid. Um, because if it's something that you truly care about or like you want to do, then you'll make the time for it. And
Mhm.
yeah, PT school is very busy, but the harsh reality is that it's not as busy as being a PT and it's not as busy as like working a full-time job. I don't know about you, but I felt way busier on my rotations than I did when I was in school.
Right.
And I was like, oh my gosh, like my CI, this is their day. Like working a full-time job is no joke.
It's no joke.
And then obviously when you're going home and you're doing all the extra stuff that's required while you're on a clinical, you'll
Mhm.
have way less time then than you will when you're just a PT student. Of course, school comes first, but that's why I think the easiest way to build a personal brand is to just document what you're already doing, because then the only extra time that you're putting in is the editing side of things, and you can make that super simple nowadays.
Yeah.
Social media isn't overly edited as much as it used to be.
Right.
So I don't think the time commitment is as much as people really think it is. And I would just say start with something sustainable. Don't try and start posting every day because you might do that for like 3 weeks and then you'll probably stop. And then, of course, posting for the first 3 weeks didn't work because you were just starting. So then you'll be like, ah, it's not worth it. And then you'll stop. Just
Yeah.
like post every once in a while. Don't try and burn out on it. You have 3 years in PT school. Like, just go for it, you know?
Yeah. I think that's really good advice. And it's worth noting too that like a personal brand is one of the most flexible jobs you can have.
Yeah.
Be did you find like, did you work any other jobs or did you feel, where did you feel in that spectrum with personal brand compared to other
As
jobs?
far as during school, the only jobs that I worked were like student jobs at my school.
Okay,
So those were pretty flexible because it was pretty much like sign up as you go, and a lot of them you could do homework while you're at the job.
nice.
I would say those student jobs are like always a good call. But like working on clinicals, I mean, that's a full-time job, or like all my high school and college summer jobs, those are definitely way less flexible than a personal brand or than, school jobs. So I think
Yeah,
the flexibility of a personal brand is just way more than you're going to get with a normal job for sure.
yeah. And the ceiling too, I think is something to note because this, like you
Yeah,
have for the person, like for the regular job and the ceiling for a personal brand is like up here.
it's absurd. And I think it's kind of like the gold rush of our time because, like we talked about earlier, with AI, everything's getting commoditized. Trust is at an all-time low. And so if you can establish yourself as a real person on the internet,
Yeah,
and as far as a personal brand, like people have those things that they associate you with, the Cafe Bustelos and all that,
yeah,
then it's kind of like a cheat code in the sense that people just know you're a real human. And that sounds weird, but like when I DM somebody, I know, like, let's just be real. Every person that you DM is going to go look at your account before they respond.
yeah,
Have you ever gotten a DM from somebody and like not checked out their account? Like it's just human nature. You want to see who's DMing you. And when they click on your account to see who's DMing them and they see 200 posts and you're actually in the same house every time or like in the same community and you're not AI and you have a personality, then it's this authentication of like, okay, this is a real person. Not that they think you're a bot, but just that they know a little bit about you and they have some context. And then that works both ways as well. Because if you're authentic with your personal brand, then when people meet you in real life, they're like, oh, it's Zach from online. They feel like they already know you.
right.
And so I think it's really just the biggest opportunity of our generation is showing up and being a real human online.
Yeah. And I think that's twofold too, especially with like more when I was in school, this was just coming up, but now so many students, like I was at CSM a couple months ago, and like
Oh,
you said,
awesome.
it was the exact same thing. Like I felt like I know some of these people and we've never met. That was the first time meeting in person.
Yep. Yeah. It's a huge part of it. And then people that you meet in person as well, being able to give them your Instagram.
Hmm.
If you have stuff where like you're showing up online, then it's just cool for them because now they already know you in person, but they get to see the online side of you as well. So it's just the move all around. I would recommend it to everybody.
Yeah, for sure. And you're wearing a league level shirt. How did you
I
feel?
am, yes.
Tell us more about league level.
So where do I even start? I've always known that I want to get into my own practice.
Mhm.
Part of that comes from kind of the direction our profession is heading. I don't want to talk about it negatively, um, but I think that private practice is kind of the way that we're heading, just with reimbursement rates going down. And again, I don't want to be negative, but like I've been in some traditional physical therapy clinics,
Mhm.
and the standard of care is just pretty low. Like it doesn't matter how great of a clinician you are, and some of the best clinicians that I've ever worked with, I want to emphasize this, the smartest, the best with patients, like some of the best clinicians do work in traditional clinics, but there's no way to have the same standard of care when you're working with three people at a time, or
Right.
when you're having to do pre-authorization, or when you have a kid with an ACL tear and they can't see you for longer than 2 months because of insurance, and then the 2 months until them getting back to sport, that's the most important part of PT. So there's all these factors that just kind of push me towards for sure wanting to open my own practice. And through making these connections and being able to kind of see behind the scenes of the highest levels of sport, I also wanted to make my private practice within the world of sports. And I think the unique angle that I want to take is being able to offer that league level of care to people who aren't professional athletes, whether it's semi-pro, college, high school, or just the adult that like runs marathons and actually trains or does CrossFit. And they're looking for more than just the traditional physical therapy model.
Right.
You'd be surprised also the amount of DMs that I've had with people while I was a student when I couldn't technically treat them as a PT.
Yeah.
And they're like, bro, I'm going to PT right now, but like I stopped going because it was cookie cutter and I still have this pain and blah, blah, blah. And it's just like, I want to help that person that is in their PT session and realizes, what the heck am I doing here? My physical therapist doesn't even work out, and I need somebody who can get me back to working out. And so I think taking that angle of, hey, this is what the pro athletes are getting for their rehab, and everything's dialed in. They have a nutritionist, they have a strength and conditioning team, like they have everything. I want to make it as close as possible to that level of detail and that experience that a pro athlete gets, but just making that available and accessible to people who aren't pro athletes.
That's really cool. And I feel like that's a niche that's super underserved because like when people
Mhm.
think of sports PT, they think of like the professional teams, but then there's like this whole other category of people that are motivated, active, like you said, running marathons, and there just isn't that. I feel like you're serving a really niche population that's really underserved.
Yeah, and I have thought about like getting into the pro sports world, but from some of these connections I've made, like I've heard the reality of pro sports and it's not all glamorous. Like you're working maybe 60 hours a week on paper, but that turns
Mhm.
into 80 hours a week with all the other tasks you have to do.
Right.
And you're just traveling all the time and it seems like a great opportunity if you want to get into sports. You can definitely make connections doing it, but you just have to know what's coming with the sports world. And I'm way more drawn to having my own thing. And I can still work with professional athletes
Right.
if I want to, and fly out to see them or they come see me, whatever. And a lot of the pro athletes do prefer private practitioners in some cases, just because, the rehab staff has a whole team to deal with, and
Right.
sometimes they can't get full on treatment. But yeah, I mean, there's so many nuances. And again, I'm not going to talk negatively about anybody because I think our profession needs more positivity towards each other. But that's kind of why I started league level and why I want to get into that world.
That's awesome. I'm so glad you mentioned that too, because there's so many nuances to that, and I
Yeah,
hopefully that just expands the horizon for a lot of students.
for sure.
I had a great question. I forgot to write it down though, so I will
Ah,
probably circle back
no
to
worries. No
it.
worries. Remember it.
In terms of like building the foundation for where you are now, do you feel like
Yeah.
any certifications or any continuing education that you really can stand on feel like you helped where you are now?
Yeah, so I'm going to circle back to what we were talking about earlier as far as how many of my early connections happen online versus in person. I would say if you know what field you want to get into, I'm just going to talk about sports because that's the lens that I look at it through. But go to as many continuing educations as possible, especially if they're from people that you want to learn from and you feel like you could benefit from a connection with. So I drove to I went to school like near Milwaukee. I drove to Green Bay for a conference. I drove to Chicago for a conference. I've flown to Florida for a conference. Like, you're already in so much debt. What's an
Yeah,
extra $200 ticket to a continuing ed course, which most of the time they make cheaper for students anyways,
right,
and then 40 bucks of gas to get back to and back from a place.
right.
I have never once in my whole entire life regretted going to a continuing ed course that I signed up for, wanting to like go to that. So I think as much of those as you can go to, the better, because you get to make those in-person connections and actually learn from people who are at the top of the game so that you can be a better provider. So that's my number one is not necessarily like a certification,
Mm.
but go to as many in-person events as possible. And then my number two is any certification that you can get without being a physical therapist, do it as soon as possible. A lot of people will say like, "Oh, I'm going to do that once I'm on my clinical rotation. Or, oh, I'll do that after school while I'm studying for boards. And it's like, those are busier times than ever.
Right.
The best time is probably undergrad if you can. Second best time is either gap year or whatever time you have off between undergrad and grad school. So I got my CSCS, which is a strength and conditioning certification, during grad school. If I could go back and do it again, I would have gotten that in like the 3 months that I had off,
Yeah.
after undergrad between grad school. And that's just something that's going to help you leverage yourself for clinicals. Maybe you want to go on a pelvic health clinical. If you've taken like the pelvic health, like level one thing, you're going to get that clinical. So anything that you can do that you aren't required to be a PT already for, I would say 100% do it while you're in school. You won't want to do it once you're out, and you definitely won't want to do it during like a busy time, such as during a clinical rotation. So I'd say, yeah, they help a ton, and your patients won't know what they mean, but the people in the field will know what they mean, and that you can leverage for sure.
Right. I love that you had mentioned too that it gives you some leverage when you're choosing those clinical rotations
Yeah,
because those specialty rotations can be a little more competitive.
yeah, for sure.
If you could go back to your first semester of PT school, what would you tell yourself in terms of sitting where you are now versus back
Oh
then?
gosh. Um, can I split this up into
Yeah,
like different categories? Okay.
by all
I'd say
means.
school-wise, treat it like the hardest thing that you're ever going to have to go through. I had no life my first semester of PT school because I'd watched my brother go through med school, which is a lot tougher than PT school. And so I expected it to be like that going in. So I studied more than ever. The goal was to get a 100% on everything. Like I grinded.
Mhm.
Looking back, that is not the way to manage PT school as a whole, but I am genuinely glad that I did it my first semester. So I'd say go into your first semester, overestimate how hard it's going to be, and it's easier to back off in your second semester than it is to be like, oh, wait, I need to do a lot more than I'm doing right now.
Right.
So I'd say I would keep that the same. Go all for it, school, first semester. Um, From a personal branding side of things, I wish that I would have started that sooner and been more consistent with it, just for the reasons that we've talked about. And then from just a time management and quality of life perspective, I'd say as soon as that first semester is done, to get out of that mindset
Yeah,
and realize how important it is to practice what you preach, take life day by day, and actually still stay active, still spend time hanging out with your friends, doing the things that you like to do, have interests outside of PT school, and you don't have to get 100% on everything. It feels like you want to know everything for PT school, but then you realize the further in that you get, that everything you're learning in PT school, even if you had that 100% memorized, you probably wouldn't be the best PT. So PT school prepares you for boards, and you need to be prepared for boards. So pay attention in classes and do well, but it's not everything. And I'd spend probably 20 to 30% of your time looking at the specific field of PT that you want to get into and what the top providers in that field are saying as far as current evidence and research, and then spend 70% of your time on the school stuff that you have to memorize. You'll still do well enough to pass tests and get through PT school, but you'll be ultimately better prepared when you get out.
that's awesome advice. And I hope a lot of people hear that because
Yeah.
there's so much pressure. And like you said, it's just for like a season that you have that level of intensity. And then it frees up
Yep.
so much, gives you so much freedom for the rest of PT school.
Hmm. Yeah, especially when you're comparing that first semester as your backdrop. Because
Yeah.
it's a lot. I mean, most
Yeah.
students are taking their big three, like anatomy, phys, and neuro, right off the bat, and they throw all those classes on you at once.
Right.
And it's such a transition from undergrad. You definitely have to study a lot more. But yeah, I think if you overestimate how hard it's going to be, then you'll be pleasantly surprised.
Yeah. To end this, I'm trying to figure out how to word this, but with
Yeah.
everything that's all the noise that's going on about the profession right now, I'm going to end with the question, and you started as a PT, but how has being a PT been? Have you found, would you recommend going to PT school for students that are on the fence or wanting to go into the profession?
It depends why you're on the fence, I would say. Um, I think there are so many ways to make an impact in the same world that PTs live in. So, like, again, I see this from a sports lens,
Mhm.
but I know so many strength and conditioning professionals who are very, very good and they can handle end stage rehab stuff. And I would almost trust them more handling end stage rehab than just any old PT. And so if you want to work in like that side of things, then you really have to weigh, is 3 years and six figures of student debt worth it to have that title and that availability to work within the field? But if you're debating PT and you're on the fence because you feel like everybody's saying bad things about the profession and all that, um, then I would say you really have to dive into, is this what you want to do or not? Because at the end of the day, money's whatever. And yes, the debt to income ratio as a PT is not great. But at the end of the day, if you love what you do, then you're in a good spot. And so I think it really is a case by case of, are you willing to take the downsides for the upside of doing what you want for a profession? And I would have, as much as possible, a picture of what that looks like. If you're on the fence about going into PT and you don't even know what you want to do in PT, then like take a gap year and try and figure it out. Um, because I think so many of us rush into things, and I would say just really know that PT is what you want to do. But so far it's been rewarding, and if you know that you want to do it, then go for it.
Yeah. I think that's awesome advice. And I can speak to from my perspective, being a PT for about a year and a half now.
Mhm.
It really is what you make it. And there's not many professions, especially in the medical field, where you have as many options for settings, patient
100%.
populations. So it's been worth it for me, and I'm in a lot of debt. So it's just like you said, a case to case basis.
Yeah, I think that it is what you make it is pretty much a better way to sum up what I just said. Like you can do anything with the PT degree, and I think that's kind of what sets us apart is being able to have that flexibility. And there's so many different things that you can get into within the profession. So I think that is a benefit. And yeah, do with that what you will, but know what you want to go into for sure, or at least have an idea.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Zach, for taking time for this. If
Of
students want to
course.
connect with you, do you have any socials you want to share, anything like that?
Yes, the easiest way to get in touch with me is just DM me on Instagram. It's Zac.Farson, Zac.Farson. And I respond to all my DMs, and it's not a bot, it's actually me. So if you want to get in touch, just reach out and let me know you're coming from here.
Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching.
Of course. Thank you guys.